Welcome to the WP-Tonic This Week in WordPress and SaaS podcast, where Jonathan Denwood interviews the leading experts in WordPress, e-learning, and online marketing to help WordPress professionals launch their own SaaS.
Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic This Week in WordPress and SaaS. This is our monthly roundtable show where we're going to be discussing everything to do with WordPress, SaaS, and tech in general. I've got a great regular panel. We will attempt to get a guest every month to join us. I've got a fabulous guest this week. I'm very appreciative that he chose to utilize some of his time with us, and he's one of the people that I really follow. We got Jason Cohen, the founder of WP Engine. So I'm going to let Jason and then the rest of the panel introduce themselves, and then we'll go into the main stories of WordPress and SaaS in general. Obviously, we're going to be discussing ChatGPT, the Google layoffs, WordPress proposing to maybe utilize GitHub. We got a load of stories. So first, Jason, would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Sure. My name is Jason. Online, I'm known as A Smart Bear because of the startup I did before WP Engine 20 years ago, which was called Smart Bear. And so that became my online persona. I sold that company in 2007 and left in 2009. That was a bootstrapped software company, and started WP Engine 13 years ago. So in 2010, I had a blog. I still do. That got popular and on Hacker News every week, and then the blog would crash, and I would call up other bloggers and say, "Hey, what do you do to keep WordPress up when you get slammed with traffic?" And they're like, "I don't know, but if you find it, tell me because I need that." So that was the birth of WP Engine, and now we're 1,200 people all around the world. We have over 200,000 customers. We're the 8th largest web host. I don't mean WordPress. I mean websites, like all websites, and about the same size as SiteGround and Squarespace and folks like that. And in terms of how many websites we manage, and I still write. And so right now at WP Engine, I work on things like corporate strategy and some of our newer products and some internal data stuff.
That's great. I've got my friend Heather. Heather, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am Heather Wild-Renzi. I am the CTO of The Difference Consulting, and I am also known as the Unicorn Whisperer for my ability to help people find their unicorn power.
Yeah, go. You need that unicorn power. I've got my regular co-host of the WP-Tonic show, Kirk. Kirk, would you like to introduce yourself? You're muted.
I'm Kurt Van Anen. I own a little agency called Mañana No Mas. I help Jonathan with WP-Tonic, and just thrilled to be here. I love the panel.
All right. I got my friend Chris Badger, the CEO of Lifter LMS. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, I'm Chris from Lifter LMS, a learning management system for WordPress. I also have a podcast for the e-learning industry and the WordPress pros that support it called LMS Cast.
I've got to tell you, Jason, Chris is one of the most calmest people I know. He actually had to listen to me ranting and raving a little while ago for about 20 minutes, and he just said, "You need to calm down, Jonathan." There we go. I've got my co-host of the Membership Machine host show and a friend, even though I can instantaneously drive him bonkers. I've got Spencer. Spencer, would you like to introduce yourself?
It's Spence from SpencerForeman.com. And I just want to add two things. First of all, Jason, I had the pleasure of talking to at the moment you were starting WP Engine. And I remember the phone call because I've met a lot of people over my years in law and real estate and software. But I got to say, you stand as one of those rare people who I felt from our conversation was one of the smartest guys I've ever spoken to. And you've proven it out in exponential ways. But I'm really, it's sort of exciting to speak to you now this many years later, because now we see the result of all your idea coming to fruition. And then the second thing is, I've known Jonathan as long or otherwise, and we're like an old married couple. We continue to go back and forth, but old things keep coming around again if you stay there long enough. So
yeah, Jason, he never says that I'm the most intelligent person he's met. Those words would never.
It's too kind, but I'll take it anyway.
Yeah, those words would never come across his mouth. So there we go. So let's go straight into it, panel, because we've got a ton to discuss. To say that there's been a lot of news this month should be the understatement of the year. So let's start off. I got kind of grouped about 3 stories around ChatGPT and OpenAI. One of them is Google is freaking out about ChatGPT, Getty Images suing, Stable Diffusion, and then publishers utilizing AI and being found out. It's just exploded. So, Jason, is there any kind of linkage that you see between all these diverse stories about this subject?
Yeah, I mean, clearly all of these and more. I mean, you could add in things like, what about bias in AI? What about dangerous things that it can do? What about the fact that sometimes it's not very accurate and it's hard to know how to check that at scale, just like it's hard to, say, moderate social media at scale. I mean, there's a lot of issues around AI that are all linked. Because essentially, if you have something this broad and this powerful, it's hard to imagine what can corral it or manage it other than something equally as broad and powerful. And that's itself kind of a conundrum. But specifically about these things, like Google freaking out about ChatGPT, I think they're freaking out from a product perspective, but not a technology perspective. So in other words, like, let's not forget, AlphaGo, beat the best Go player a long time ago. The chess thing was incredible. The StarCraft thing was incredible because it's real time and fog of war and responsive. That's substantially more difficult than even chess or Go. AlphaFold just invented a new medicine. That's insane. Google search actually does answer the questions correctly that ChatGPT does not. Like, let's not forget that. So, like, Google, it's behind on productization, meaning taking that tech which they have and making it a product others can buy. That's something that, for example, Amazon has always been insanely good at. They're always like, oh, let's take a fraction of our business and turn that into its own product. And they just do that hundreds of times, right? Google kind of doesn't do any of that. They're like, we'll just have all this tech. And I don't know, ads is a good business. And so like they had, like, think about it. They had like Borg well before Kubernetes or containers or anything. They were already doing all that stuff, but they didn't productize it. Or they had App Engine, which was pretty good. But like that didn't stop Firebase from winning anyway, because it was kind of weird. So like Google makes amazing tech, and they have possibly the best AI even now. Possibly, it's hard to even measure that. I don't know, but let's say they're not behind. Let's just say that. But productization, they suck, and they do generally, like, just culturally, it's an engineering-run company, not a product-run company. So they're good at tech, and it's hard for them to figure out product. So I think that's actually their challenge is productizing the technological place they're at, which is not losing, possibly even ahead.
Yeah, so Heather, I think the other thing is like any established business, when you've got a maybe disruptive technology, you don't want to upset the apple cart, because Google, as it is to say it's a money-generating machine would be the understatement of the century. So I think maybe that's one of the other elements. What do you reckon, Heather?
So absolutely, Google needs to make money at some point. But I think what's difficult here is that they've been creating products and releasing products like Deep AI for a few years, and they release it, and then somebody else comes along like Stable Diffusion, and it's so much better than what we see from Google. And another problem is that Google will do something and then drop that product line. So there's a lot of lack of trust in Google right now. So in some ways, I think the Google internal team is they don't have trust in themselves, and externally, people have lost trust in Google to innovate. So, yeah, I mean, I think they really are behind. And now that they've seen Microsoft and OpenAI, how far ahead they are from everyone else, they're getting rid of everyone that's stagnant inside the company and just going to focus on products that will catch up.
So, what do you reckon, Chris? There's rumours that the founders are coming back to head the Google beast. I don't know how true that is or how much that would help anyway. So, what do you reckon, Chris?
Well, the first thing I'm trying to do just at the big picture is wrap my head around, like, is AI really the next big revolution, like the industrial revolution, the information age? Are we in fact entering an AI age? And I think it is a big deal. And also, technology adoption isn't an event, it's a process. And OpenAI captured lightning in a bottle with, mass adoption of ChatGPT, which is interesting. Some of it's rational, some of it is just irrational and random. So will Bing disrupt Google search because they captured lightning in a bottle here, or will Google, innovate ahead and maintain search dominance by integrating DeepMind or whatever with the search function and meet the market demand and play catch up? I don't really know. At the end of the day, I'm just having a lot of fun watching the market respond, watching virality happen, and also just asking the big questions around how have tools changed society before, with the automobile and the horses and, the printing press and the internet and WordPress and so on. Like, this is another one of those big step functions. So I'm just having fun just living through this as well and thinking about what is the place of the human going forward. I don't think humanity is going away. It is going to be a lot of disruption in the job markets, but there's also opportunity in that, and thinking about how humans can be the creative directors and prompt engineers and directing the AI code writing and content creation and art creation is really a fascinating topic.
So, Spence, it's not really, in a way, it's scraping. It's looking at all these different sources, original content, and then it's analysing it all and then churning out something that's kind of semi-unique, but it is using other people's content. And it's not saying, unless it's using images from Getty that's got watermarks on them, I think the lawyers must be salivating about this. It's years of court actions and suing, because it is taking other people's content and using it without infringing on these people's copyright, isn't it? You're muted, Spencer.
I would like to unpack maybe 3 points. First of all, I'm going to piggyback onto what Jason said, because one of the things that I think is really relevant here is that Google has a lot of firepower stored away. But Google has always been known for taking advantage, in my opinion, of their inability to monetize products or to understand the end user. And there's an endless list for 15 years or whatever it's been of like, oh, we started this, we killed that. We started this, we killed that. Oh, and nobody wants to get on that ship anymore. But at the same time, let's be honest. OpenAI and ChatGPT have unleashed the reality of that firewall they had built around search results. A couple months ago, I was on here with Rand Fishkin and telling him how I was really I don't pay attention to the rules of Google anymore because it's like a friend that keeps changing their mind. Well, what this is doing is disrupting the model by saying your biggest competitor, Microsoft, now owns something that gives a better results in a more human way. Even if it's littered with affiliate links that people are paying for, most human beings prefer to consume it than in the way you've been jamming down our throat of like 5 ads here, 10 ads here, and so forth. Number 2, from the standpoint of like what it's going to be, Chris addressed that. And by the way, hi, Chris, and hi, Heather, hi, Kurt, is that I see this as the first example of all the things that will complement the way people do stuff. When I started out as a young attorney, we didn't have fax machines or text messages or even computers yet. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm that old. I can't imagine what it's like to start a law practice today, imagining not having those tools. Well, in a few years, we'll see what the human element is, but I really believe it's going to be complementary, because we've already seen examples of how AI is not smart enough to recognize a soldier wearing a box over their head. And we've seen how, in the car field, how the cars don't always get it right. But the third thing is that the fact that Sergey and Larry have to be called back is sort of a red alert, because the worst outcome for all of us is if the shareholders go into a panic. And this latest round of layoffs is really telling. Google laid off 12,000 people, not because they had to, because I believe they made something on the order of 67 to 72 billion in profits the last quarter. They laid them off because they needed to appease the shareholders who would otherwise be like, why aren't we laying off people? And that's the problem in our society today. We are always promised technology is going to make it easier for humans to have a better life. And instead, there's a layer at the top of shareholders owning and controlling everything, and everybody now sort of at the bottom. And the between part is where Skynet comes about. And if they use this as let's unleash all of the things from our firepower to win the game against Microsoft, we're all in a lot worse condition than if cooler heads prevail.
So, Kirk, are you looking forward to Skynet? Is that will be the cockles of your heart, Kirk?
Yeah, yep. I am looking to hit the road and use the Skynet pretty much all the time, I'm hoping. As far as the conversation goes, the panel is really hitting it. I mean, Jason with the bias and productization. I did my own kind of very non-scientific experiment with ChatGPT, and the bias is evident in the answers. If you take highly politicized topics and you ask it questions from different perspectives, one time it'll say, I can't answer that because you're a racist. And the next time it'll say, here's this great explanation of this topic. And so it's interesting to see that bias at work. The other thing is, like Heather said, with trust, I don't trust Google to take over or build off of anything and supply it for any length of time. I'm one of those fools that dives into everything as an early adopter, thinking I want to get early traction. And I can remember the hundreds of hours I spent building my Google Plus account, So it's like, you just don't know how long they're going to stick with something. You don't know how long they're going to develop.
Well, it's funny that it's strange that you choose Google Plus, because that had some original ideas and UX design elements. And I felt they dropped that miles too short. It could have built out to something really interesting, where a lot of their stuff is, I don't know, I'm going to be diplomatic, and that's a rarity for me. All right, let's go on to story 2, which is on the tavern. Being that tavern is the mouthpiece of the founder, one of the joint founders of WordPress and Automatic. What got me is it got this story. WordPress community team proposes adopting GitHub to improve collaboration, which I do agree it probably would. But the problem is it's owned by Microsoft. And then you had a second story that came up afterwards about that they're unhappy with utilizing Slack and they're looking to utilize open source. So as normal, it's a total contradiction on the tavern. What do you reckon about this, Jason?
I mean, my initial reaction is using more modern tools helps more people actually contribute to WordPress. And when you have things like old bug systems with tons of stuff that's not cleaned up, and also the system is not something new people know how to use, or version control systems that are the same, it's good to modernize that because it helps people contribute. So in that sense, I really like it. Now, I do also understand the idea of, don't we have a higher value and a cultural value of open source? Yeah. And if we do, then should that just run through everything regardless?
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting idea. It certainly is a core idea of WordPress. For the 20th anniversary, Matt, repeated the post. I think even Mike Little repeated the post where it started. And one of the things Matt said in that very, very first thing was, I was considering using this other tool, but I couldn't get on board with the licensing. But with B2, I could get on board with the GPL. So it's that fundamental. It's that in the DNA. I think we all know that, but just to underscore it that much more, how in the DNA it is. If that's true, then I think you could have both more modern tools that invite more people and use modern things and just keeps WordPress fresher from a developer perspective. And that. So for example, GitLab, also a very modern, great structure, but also open source. Now you could still pay GitLab to run it. Of course, that's fine. But the point being that it's fundamentally a GPL thing. So Git is still nice because GPL, GitLab would be a modern thing people can get on board with. And it's GPL. And you could make the same case about other things, I suppose. So I think if you want to hold that value and say that's a requirement for everything .org does, I think that's fine. But you can still modernize. You don't have to use an old thing that is hard for people to navigate.
So what do you reckon, Spencer? I think it's kind of dual message. What a surprise, Spencer. A kind of black and white answer, isn't it?
This is Ludditism in reverse, to be fair. I mean, I think your mind was in the same camp with Jason in this, that when you look at the overarching problems of WordPress, they have a common theme. Somebody has made a political pseudoscience decision to do something because they feel warm and fuzzy or not warm and fuzzy about it. But if you asked any developer / techie person, what's the thing everybody uses to collaborate on building code? GitHub would come up number one. So why in 2023 are we debating it as a top? It's because somebody just doesn't feel good about it at WordPress Automatic. And that's nonsense. And, the other stuff about Slack and collaborative channels, you can argue Discord versus Slack versus, hey, let's use P2 version 3. But it doesn't change the fact that, I myself in the social network realm have not disconnected Facebook, even for my social networks about flying and stuff, because I realized every single human being has a phone with the ability to use Facebook and just start collaborating. Can't we all get along and just do that now? Because I do contribute to the repository. An SVN in 2023? I don't think so.
Yeah. What do you reckon, Heather?
I agree with Spencer 100%. I mean, it's just so easy to use GitHub, and you can WordPress is open source, so put it on the #1 open source community. And I honestly and it allows you to use Copilot immediately, without any issue. So yeah, just put it. And Microsoft can even make it a free enterprise collaboration tool as well. I don't see any problem at all having it on GitHub.
Yeah, but I agree with everything that's been said, Heather. But they got in a bit of hot waters about what was that story a couple of months ago that they were utilizing code snippets and they who owned the code and blah blah blah. But
all it needs to do is if somebody's using Copilot to check in, it can just like Dependabot does. It can just say this code was commented by Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever. I don't see a problem with that.
So, Chris, is it really a kind of quasi-religion in the heart of Automatic? It's not open source, so we can't use it. Does it have to be a bit more pragmatic than that, really?
I can't speak to the Automatic culture because I don't work there. I don't have inside perspective, but there is an operational concern I have, which is I have seen non-developers have a challenge getting into GitHub as a project management tool. And, this article is about the community team, which is organizing WordCamps and things like that. I'm not 100% sure that GitHub is the best way, because it was really designed around version control and software for teams to collaborate on non-development stuff. It would be nice though, the holy grail for this giant open source project is to use the same tool for everything from project management perspective. But I also heard entrepreneur Brian Castle say once when we were exploring a similar thing to use GitHub for everything and outside of development, But he made a comment, GitHub's more linear and things like Trello are more open-ended and collaborative for more artistic, kind of less linear processes. So that's my only concern, is that I know GitHub has Kanban capabilities and can kind of be used very similar to Trello. I'm just not sure that non-developer contributors are going to have an easy time adopting into it. I think there'll be a little bit of friction there, but the idea of everybody using the same tool would be great.
Yeah, you got a great point there, actually. Thanks for that, Chris. Got anything to say about this, Kirk, before I go for my first break?
When it comes to GitHub, I'm always like the nerd that goes to the cool guys party. I never got GitHub every time I try, but I'm an implementer, not a developer, to Chris's point. And I think that there's other tools that are just more natural to use, for event planning and project planning and things like that.
Can I throw in something? Nomad, I recognize him from Twitter. We were talking about something similar. I want to say this because I am a journeyman developer. I would say that's number 47 on my list of things I know how to do and not really well. GitHub or Tortoise or any of the, Tortoise SVN, like most people need a GUI interface. I would love to be one of those guys who can get on a terminal and just go to town with, bash and all that. Never going to happen, never will. Even when I did certain things in other professions, I shortcutted it. So I think the issue is not the overarching capacity of the tool. It's the randomness of all the suite of things people now use in WordPress to communicate. It's like, you got to go to this forum or this thing posted on WordPress.org or that. At least there would be one thing that, of course, many of us would have to use an interface for, but you could find it in one spot, kind of like not having 24 folders in a file cabinet. It's just, there it is, right on the table. And that would be such an improvement, because right now, nobody really understands what's happening underneath the covers of the WordPress decision process. And the developers themselves are randomly fixing bugs based on an ad hoc thing in SVN. And I think a lot of the problems are just from why hasn't this been fixed yet? People just can't voice their opinion in one place, like a community, public square.
Right. Thanks for that. I think we'll go for our first break. We'll be back in a few moments. Got a couple messages from our major sponsors. Be back in a few moments, folks.
Are you looking for ways to make your content more engaging? Sensei LMS by Automatic is the original WordPress solution for creating and selling online courses. Sensei's new interactive blocks can be added to any WordPress page or post. For example, interactive videos let you pause videos and display quizzes, lead generation forms, surveys, and more. For a 20% off discount for the tribe, just use the code WP-Tonic, all one word, when checking out, and give Sensei a try today.
Hi there, folks. It's Jonathan Denwood here, and I want to tell you about one of our great sponsors, and that's Zolo.com. If you've got a WordPress website, a membership website, and you're looking to link it with a great financial management package, Zolo can provide this solution. So all your bookkeeping needs are done through Zolo. If you need new inbox email functionality and you don't want to pay the high charges that Google will charge you, Zolo offers a great email inbox platform. They've got over 50 apps and services that all integrate fantastic with WordPress at great value levels, and they almost always offer a fully functioning free product as well. So it's just amazing value. Also, if you're a WordPress developer or agency owner, Zolo are looking for great partnerships in the WordPress space. To get all this information, all you have to do, folks, is just go over to Zolo.com and they have the products that you're looking for. Thank you so much, Zolo, for supporting WP-Tonic and the Machine membership shows. It's much appreciated. We're coming back. Should have done that break earlier. I'm out of practice, folks. I just want to point out, if you're looking to sponsor the show, we've got some great packages. Starts at $250 if you want just to promote a new plugin service or a SaaS product. It's a great way of getting that in front of a interested audience of developers, entrepreneurs, and power users. To do that, go to WP-Tonic/sponsorship, and you'll be able to see all the great value packages we offer. Right, let's go back into it. Google cuts 12,000 jobs. Funny enough, listeners and viewers, I was talking to a middle-level Google manager, and he said he was... they got the message from the CEO. They were all huddled around their email waiting if they were going to be one of the chosen. And he said he was saved, but he had some colleagues that got the chop. What do you reckon about this, Jason, and the way it was done? Any thoughts about it, Jason?
Yeah, a number of things. So first of all, it is possible to grow in a sustainable manner, and so even when there's an economic downturn, you don't have to be so catastrophic. WP Engine and Automatic, as far as I know, did not do layoffs, and as Spencer pointed out, like, it's not like Google couldn't afford it in some literal sense to have people. I think there's probably a more philosophical thing about humans, capitalism, economics, societal responsibility, how companies can be profitable, sure, reward innovation, sure, reward risk. I think that's actually the biggest thing, to reward risk with proportionally outsized upside by taking the risk. That makes sense. But then, as Spencer said earlier, or was alluding to, so I don't want to talk for him, but I think this is what he meant. Sure, but okay, once that pays off, and like you could easily just not lay off 12,000 people and still have this outsized everything, then you still don't do it, then what's going on? And so there's this philosophical point, which I think is maybe the most interesting one, although the hardest to change, because it's a global phenomenon that's difficult to change, but still really interesting to talk about. I think on a more practical level, when you look at Google's hiring curve over the last 10 years or even the last 5 years, it's very, very strong. So if they hire hundreds of thousands of people and then tick back 12,000 and then continue to hire, on the one hand, you could say it's 12,000 people. You must not minimize that, and I agree. On the other hand, you can say in the scope of this hiring curve, it's a small correction, and you do it during economic downturn where you probably made some investments in areas that now you aren't going to make investments in. And so you undo that. And unfortunately, of course, since you hired fast, then you have to fire in order to undo those bets that you no longer want to take. That's the more practical view. It doesn't negate what Spencer said, by the way. Like, it in no way negates it, but it's not necessarily like, because there's millions of shareholders of Google stock, which there is, that means a manager in Austin who fires someone on a team cares about that shareholder. So there is definitely it's indirect, meaning what is it that companies are valued by generally, and what incentives does that put on the company, and then what do they do as a result? It's not like shareholders decide to lay off 12,000 people. That's of course physically not what happens. But it is true that whatever we value on Wall Street is, and I know I'm making this U.S. centric, but it is in some ways U.S. centric. At least for Google, it's definitely U.S. centric because that's who most of the shareholders are, and the incentives are only one thing. And I think, we could go on, we could talk for a long time, and I think it would be actually quite interesting to do a big deep dive on this philosophy of how do you preserve the risk-taking and innovation aspects of capitalism, which clearly works and clearly has worked better than other systems in the past in terms of creating not just technology but actual higher standards of living, and globally, which again the data are very clear on that. And yet it has all these negative consequences, such as this. Although this is the least negative, someone who makes $400K a year getting laid off and then gets another great job is actually the least of the problems the least exploitative capitalism gets, right?
You say that, Jason. They've been very vocal. Those that have been dismissed have been very vocal on TikTok about their
But
feelings.
But I'm much more concerned about the literally 1 million people that work for Walmart who are exploited, or the people, or the almost that number that work for Amazon, and the warehouses that are exploited. I'm not trying to minimize anyone's experience. It's just if we want to talk about how does capitalism exploit a worker, this is the least interesting place to look for that question, even though it's a great question. So I think I do think it would be better, which is not a very useful thing to say because like that doesn't make it true. It would be better if we could incorporate in our metric of what's valuable about a company more than just return on invested capital or whatever metric that's purely financial and profit motivated. Even just the number of employees you have or the amount of total remuneration you give to employees, for example, if that kind of a metric was counted just as much as profit so that you could stack cash in the bank, but also you could give it to employees and both counted in the sense of valuation and these things that the collective shareholders care about. If that were true, that would already change this because then you wouldn't need to fire them in order to have a good metric. And of course, that's not the only thing, just having a job. There's many things, but point being like there's simple to say, perhaps impossible to implement things. If you could change the metric that people are optimizing for, that would make a very big difference. But, when Spencer said all that, I just thought about Bertrand Russell's pin shop. That's like, to me, the canonical example. He talked about that more than 100 years ago. To me, it's just as accurate today as it was then, which just demonstrates the truth of it, which is what Spencer was saying. Technology is supposed to give us all this efficiency, which means we should work less or be happier or have free healthcare and education or whatever, various spoils that should go to us if we're efficient and rich in sort of a general sense. That's what should happen. And yet it's certainly not. It was a conundrum to Bertrand Russell in whatever, 1920, 1910, whatever he wrote that. Maybe turn of the century, I don't quite remember. It's still the case, and I think it's a very good philosophical question. Changing it, that's a much more difficult question.
Yeah. So, Chris, Jason's kind of mentioned something. Go to Blake, the poet, the English poet. In his poem Jerusalem, the dark satanic mills, he was writing about people being driven into mills from the countryside. This is a big ongoing debate for the last 200, 300 years, isn't it, Chris? Isn't it?
It is, but I would also add that it's also a narrative. It's easy to attack the big guys. So Google has 125,000 employees. So this is a 10% cut. If we were talking about a 10-person team, small business, and one person got laid off during a recession, it would be a non-issue. Or a 5-person company and somebody had to go to part-time. And not to minimize the impact on the people that did lose their jobs. But I think there is a little bit of like, if it bleeds, it leads kind of story here. But there is that philosophical question around, if I can afford to keep team members around, should I? And I mean, it's easy to say yes at a big company. It's much harder to say yes at a small company. But what's the difference, really? And also, I forget, the whole history of it, that whole, I think it was Jack Welch thing where companies lay off 10% every year. I think it's called top grading or whatever.
Lovely attitude.
It's that thing is kind of woven into the fabric of
such a sweetheart, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of woven into the fabric of corporate culture, or at least super competitive versions of it. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think, like Jason said, it goes back to the big questions about capitalism and the future of work and technology, and what do we do with surplus and things like that. So,
Kurt, the only thing that Ronnie Reagan said that I really agreed with was he said a recession is when your neighbour gets sacked. A depression is when you get sacked. Is there a bit of that here? And you're muted, Kurt.
I was going to say, I think we have a misalignment here. The misalignment, which Jason rightfully alluded to, is that we have a history in the last 100 years of our democratic system and capitalism where there was a time when the deal involved an understanding, and this was until trickle-down economics, and it was compounded by Newt Gingrich and the Republicans to a certain degree, staying out of politics, where the middle class supported the upper class, and the lower class was pulled up with the promise of getting to the middle class and going above, which is unique to our country. Right now, shareholders over everybody is the watchword of this country, including New York City and Silicon Valley. And the problem is, when you look at the order of hiring in Google, not only was this 12,000 layoff contrived, but there were the people allegedly on good information were just randomly fired. Like when I was a law school student, I taught undergrads. They probably
use ChatGPT to select.
I used a special grading method for my speech comm students. I'd throw the papers down the stairs, and the ones on the first step were an A, and the second step were.
I'm not kidding you. They probably did use ChatGPT to decide which ones are going to get the job.
There's plenty of people in Twitter who were Google employees who were there for 25 years, worked on meaningful projects, were just randomly laid off suddenly. That is not indicative of either a thoughtful process, a fair process, or a process that will ultimately benefit our country as a capitalist country, because the promise that my generation, I'm 56, grew up with was you did the work, you went through the process, you got the stable promise of whatever, got a watch, got your pension. That's gone. So now it's Wild West, where the top of the top with all the money are trying to impose this, maybe manifest with OpenAI, control over the bottom. And there's not a lot in the middle right now that's very certain. And that is not good for us, good for the world, good for anybody. That's my concern about this kind of layoff process.
So you have, I reckon I'm right. I reckon they did use ChatGPT to select those who was going to get the chop. What do you reckon, Heather?
I mean, they probably had an AI. Didn't think it was ChatGPT necessarily. There's plenty of other kinds of tools that they can use for that. But realistically, we've been discussing this in my team for a while now. If you are not like on board with being a techno-sapien, if you're not on board with like enhancing,
that's a big word. What does that mean?
Like enhancing yourself with technology, like with the tech, becoming 10x, 100x yourself.
Oh, I have to add that to my vocabulary. I'll give you a star there. You come out a word.
That's like I heard the term sapiosexual. Somebody's turned on by.
I'm not going. I'm in deep enough trouble in general anyway. I'm not going there.
But if you don't meld with your technology, you are going to be left behind. I mean, and this is going to be like a hockey stick difference between the people that are comfortable with technology and the people. It's going to happen extremely quickly. And I think that all of these people that are being laid off, the way that they're choosing them are the people who are comfortable in their roles the way they are. And they may be fine programmers, they may be fine managers, they may be fine at the way they're doing this, but they're not.
Yeah, you're dropping out a bit, Heather.
Oh, sorry. Right? Yeah, hold on. Is that better?
No, it's got some background noise now.
Oh, hold on. Sorry, there's a big storm here that just came in. So, yeah, I mean, if you're not comfortable melding with your tech, being agile and changing every single day, because the world is going to change every single day now, like exponentially, then you're going to get let go. That's just how it is.
Oh, well, lovely. Lovely job.
I was actually surprised.
That was amazing.
I just love American. I love Americans.
Well, I just want to point out.
I love American.
I just want to point out. Nobody on this call knows how Google decided which people were laid off. There's these posits of things and like random, like they threw dice. The one thing you probably would say about Google is that they're not dumb. That's not one of the attributes that they are. So the idea that they would just randomly let people go is probably not the right theory. So we don't know what it is. The fact that it's everywhere instead of certain projects narrows down some of the theories. I don't want to say anything bad about anybody, right? So I don't really want to speculate that way. But just to say, like, actually, we don't know.
You're on the wrong show, Jason.
Now, to Spencer's point, it might be unethical in some way. That, I think, is a very interesting point, regardless of how it was chosen. I think that's a very interesting point. But to just assert, like, what their decision-making process is random, or that, like, if you don't believe in, getting the Neuralink, then you're fired. Like, that's probably not the decision process.
Right. Panel, I'm going to continue with the stories, but we're in the hour. We've got so much to discuss. If any of you need to drop out, please feel free. But I don't want to shorten it because we've got a few more stories to go. I do propose not to go on forever because I know you've got things to do. But let's continue. Let's go on to let's go on to this one. A WordPress awesome motive requires Fry Themes. I did interview the CEO of Fry Themes about 4 weeks ago. It was a constructive interview. They had some complaints about some of the questions I asked her. I thought that, she's a great CEO, but I did, I think I wasn't totally surprised when I heard this. So, Jason, you bought Studio Press. I thought you did it in a really great way, and I think I could totally understand why WP Engine bought it. And I think it's been managed really well, and I think it's been beneficial for those that are using Studio Press's themes and framework, and it's been very beneficial for WP Engine. Got any thoughts about this story, Jason?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we did that, and Atomic Blocks, and of course Flywheel, and Delicious Brains most recently. So yeah, we do have a history of that, and I think if you're buying something to kill it, I suppose that's one thing. Obviously, that's not what we've done. As you said, like the Studio Press thing, I think was 4 or 5 years ago now. So it's very clear that's not what we did. If you're buying to invest in it, then that's a good reason. If you take something that's a community and invest more in that, make it more open. We have a steering committee now for Studio Press, which didn't exist before. People have called for WordPress to do it. We're modeling that with the Genesis community. So I think there's a lot of good that you can do. With this particular one, I think anyone who's in an interview and is uncomfortable, you're probably asking good questions. Not that they have to answer them, but like that's probably a good interview.
Oh, she knew how to handle me with ease, Jason. It's quite easy. You just say I'm an idiot and you move on to the next.
Syed's a great entrepreneur. I think everybody knows that. He's also a good person. He's also shrewd, though. He doesn't overpay for things, and he wants to make money, and he'll tell you that to your face as well. He's good at collecting things. I mean, he's obviously bought a lot of things. He's good at collecting things that he can cross-sell into each other, which creates more leverage than they could apart. And that's part of why that's nice. Also, some of the founders stay and some don't, which of course is totally normal and expected. The ones that stay, though, are pretty happy and have stayed for years, so I assume they're happy. And it's probably fun to be at a place where innovation still happens and there's more M&A to look at and stuff. So like, that's probably pretty good. I think an interesting thing it brings up, and I'd also be curious what other people think about this, especially since I'm a little biased, so I'm more interested in what other people think. But it's interesting whenever an independent company is bought by Awesome Motive or WP Engine or Automatic or GoDaddy or whomever, one of those, is that good or bad for the community? Some people say it's bad because independent developers are part of what's great about the community, keeps the ecosystem strong, keeps competition strong. There's lots of good things about lots of independent players in a healthy ecosystem for sure. But then some people say, no, that's good because it means if you build a company inside this ecosystem, there are many ways out. And one of them is you might get bought by several different buyers, and that gives you optionality. And that's a healthy part of an ecosystem, is that there might be exit opportunities. And in some cases, it allows founders who might be burned out. I'm not saying that's the case here. Just saying this occurs frequently with bootstrap companies, including myself at Smart Bear, which I've been very public about. But founders get burnt out. Sometimes they're not able to continue or even shouldn't. But allows founders who are in that stage to get paid for their labors, have other employees and products and customers live on. That can be a very good thing too. At WP Engine, most of the founders stayed and are still here years later, but some didn't. That's kind of the point. Like it's what.
But I would say with your purchases, I think it was, and this is only outsider's perspective, is that your purchases were complementary. I sense with some of the other entities that have bought plugins that they were attempting to, like I say, this is only my perspective, they were attempting to build a kind of pseudo SaaS platform. That's what seemed to be their end line. I never sensed that WP Engine had that. Around your purchases, they seem to be developer orientated, which aligns with kind of the audience. I'm only surmising this, you can rebut me. It seemed to be the audience that WP Engine to some extent seemed to be marketing to the kind of developer audience. Would you agree with what I've just outlined?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, developers are who we care about the most. Yes, anything that helps our developers be better, or again, investing in products that developers love, investing in those more to just make those products better. That's good. Like if you're a fan of the product and we invest in it more, then the acquisition was good for you as a customer, as opposed to, of course, the opposite is as a customer you'd be upset because my favorite product got killed or underinvested until it languished. But still, so maybe the answer is it depends on the context. But it's still an interesting, I think, overall question for the ecosystem. Is it healthy to have entrants and exits? Is it bad somehow to have exits? Is it reduces the size of the ecosystem or the vibrancy or the competitive nature? It's not an easy question, I think.
What? Wow, Uncle Spencer. Be generous, Spencer. You've upset Syed a few times. I've had a few emails from Syed about your comments. So what's your words?
I'm in opportunity, Emperor's New Clothes story, little boy, who I call it like I see it. And I think Jason's point, and I'm going to just be fair here because, see, I referenced the fact that Jason, and this is not intended to stroke Jason's ego. He doesn't need that. But Jason has built...
Well, I do.
I do. You're going to get it. You're going to get it. I'm just saying. Here's the difference. I've been openly critical about WP Engine's practices with regard to forcing cash down people's throat. But aside from that issue, on the acquisition of software and Brian Gardner and all the rest versus what Syed and Asamoah, here's the difference. I call it like I see it in public. And if Jason is faced with some contradiction of what he's saying and doing in private and in the black hat realm, which he does not do, versus in public, he would be the first person, I am quite sure, to come forward in the thoughtful, methodical way he's been answering questions today and address it. My problem with Asamoah and Syed is it's a duplicitous thing to be one way in public, one way on your personal page, one way on your website, even people in the comments of the tavern where all the truth always lies. People's visceral reaction to anything Asamoah buys is like when Bob Parsons owned GoDaddy and all they can think of is the poor elephants being shot. Okay,
I do all the time.
And the difference comes down to this: at what Jason,
you don't go off to Africa.
Hold on, let me finish the thought. Let me finish the thought. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, to all those points, which are objectively true, is it the natural growth of our community for there to be consolidation? I think that's just factually true. Is it actually correct factually that most original founders and authors have burnt out and they decided to go on their way? Absolutely. Are the authors of this and other plugins and themes entitled to an exit? Absolutely. The issue is when a company acquires it, and there's now multiple vertical stacks, WP Engine, other hosting companies, there's Asamoah and so forth. I like to think that I have a certain amount of interest in that outcome as well. The issue is, how do those company founders deal with the legacy of our community that was a bunch of people sitting around a campfire as friends? Do you treat them with the level of respect that they're not stupid? Or do you try to say one thing in public and do another? Because there's people that have built other businesses like James Farmer, who I respect, who was telling the truth from day one and got completely outcast to his island where he's built up a multi-million-dollar business at WPMU. But like Matt and the rest of the team treated him as an outcast. But now we have Syed, who's wearing a badge in many cases of honor, but yet really is doing a lot of things that everybody keeps seeing aren't true. and we're calling it out. Like,
well, fair enough. It's his business. He runs it the way he wants.
But I'm saying I would have nothing to talk about as a human being, as a father, as a husband, as a friend. He's probably an awesome human being. The business that he runs is not living up to...
I love you, Syed. I love you, mate. So, Chris, I think one of the things with Fry Themes is that they attempted to build what I call a walled garden. They attempted to build a kind of quasi SaaS-based walled garden model. You had to buy all their plugins in one price, and then they wouldn't work that well with other plugins or other part of the WordPress ecosystem. They attempted to build, and then they had Arc, and that was caused by wanting their own page builder with Architect. I think, which is understandable, because I think they were one of the first to bring out a page builder. But it all had consequences, which I think and also I think Shane and the other technical founder, they just went on to better things. So I think do you think I'm on the right track that they attempted to build a kind of walled garden and it had consequences?
Potentially. There is like a portfolio of products and services they have, and I have a lot of respect for Shane.
Oh, he's a smart guy.
As a marketer, I always looked up to him. He does great marketing, content writing. He knows he has demonstrated how to be a non-technical co-founder quite well. And, even before Syed had Opt-in Monster, one of my first premium plugin purchases was Thrive Connect, which doesn't exist anymore, which allowed you to do forms that sync to your CRM and stuff like that. As Shane, as an entrepreneur, I think had some of that entrepreneur ADD. So like spread out, saw lots of opportunity, spread out. He has a competitor to me with Thrive Apprentice, and he's kind of all over the place, but it has that marketing angle on it, which I personally like, and I think is what makes it also a good fit for Syed, who's very marketing focused. In many ways, they had competing products. So for Syed and his roll-up strategy with WordPress ecosystem and building teams, I mean, one could argue that easy digital downloads is better off where it is now. Like, there's been a lot of releases lately that people have been waiting for a long time in the EDD community that have now come out with their major point release. I can't remember which level it was, but I think this is a good home for Thrive and the team. And I believe I read that the founders weren't sticking around. So when it is time, whatever the cause, whether it's burnout or wanting to do something different or whatever the reason, I think it is healthy to have an M&A ecosystem here in WordPress. And the gauge of, is it healthy or not, I think really just comes down to over a long time horizon, are the team and the users taken care of? And it's not totally black or white thing, in terms of the team. They may need to, the acquirer may lay off 10%, like we were talking about earlier, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It may look bad, but maybe they need to make it more efficient, or they're leveraging some of those, back of house, shared resources. In terms of the users, the acquirer may take a more opinionated approach to product, which may alienate some users, but might make the product stronger for its core offering and ideal customer profile or whatever. So I think this one is good. And, Syed has a proven track record with, taking on companies both fully or as partnerships, and the products don't disappear. They tend to thrive.
No, right. So Heather, I always kind of followed the logic of Jason and WP Engine with their purchases. There seemed to be some synergy. Some of the other, obviously Spencer's got his views, but the one thing, to a lesser view, it's a very diverse portfolio of plugins that Syed has bought in his team. Other players, I have not understood their logic at all, and they've been mostly some of the leading hosting companies. On a business level, I've not been able to follow the logic of their purchases at all, Heather. They don't ever seem to come their way at the right price at the right time. I got the impression they were doing it because it was just buying users and then they could sell their hosting, and they just did the math. And do you think I'm right about that?
It's a combination of things. It's not necessarily that they want the list to sell their existing products to new users, although that may be the thing. Sometimes they just need to make it look like their current user base is bigger. So because they might have a capital raise coming along, or they may be a public company already and they need to show growth. So it doesn't matter who they're buying or what the product is, just buying up a company that has a certain user base is useful. But in other ways, like if they could have a person that doesn't know anything about the ecosystem, but says this one keeps coming up at the top of the ranks in whatever category, we just need to buy that, and it doesn't matter what the price, or we have a certain amount of money that we can spend, so let's just spend it on that. So yeah, I mean, it's a combination of things, but usually it is for users, but not necessarily to sell to them, just because they want to show growth and they need to show a certain amount of growth every quarter.
Isn't this just a certain amount of, we're playing on a monopoly board in WordPress, and Syed and his company essentially have all the cash, hotels and houses on most of the property, and everybody who's about to leave the game is like, there's the first person I'm going to talk to is Uncle Syed, because he's basically the one that can offer me a great exit. Because I want to reflect on something. I don't know what the internals are, but obviously we're friends with Brian Gardner and so forth. The acquisition of Genesis and Brian and his team seemed to have been productive for his talent and the creativity. There wasn't any political backlash or community backlash about suddenly Jason and his team, or Heather, whoever, just turned it upside down and doubled the price with 50% off the first year. But those are exactly the shenanigans that happen every single time there's an acquisition at Automotive. And that's so different, isn't it? Because you could sell out this way, sell out that way, and it's good for the founders.
But it's the kind of, you're trying to compare, the Sunday Times with the bloody Sun, aren't you? They're both newspapers.
I'm not saying
they've just got different ways of doing stuff, haven't they?
Look, there's like in geopolitics, there's different continents, different nation states that are in charge of the world and have empires at certain times. There's a certain vertical stack of companies, many of which are hosting at their nature, that are acquiring properties and assets from the original layer of WordPress. And what they do with it has a lot to do with the future of WordPress in general, as well as for the customers, because the customers have been trained like little monkeys and doggies that we buy our plugins from Bob and Susie and Stevie, and they're going to support it personally. And then they go away because now Uncle Syed or Uncle GoDaddy or Uncle WP Engine owns it, and they get treated very differently. And now people have a resentment. But that's only inside of the bubble of WordPress. In the outside world, where the real play is for the other 50-something%, that's where the future of WordPress, because then there's the automatic vertical, the Jetpack and the VCs backing that, who are all doing the do as we say, not as we do model with the phoning home and so forth. So this is the future of WordPress, in my opinion, not the little nonsense about GitHub. And I think that's why we all have to call it as we see it, because those who are in the livelihood of WordPress are affected by it to a certain degree.
All right. What do you reckon, Kurt?
Sometimes I get washed up in the tech talk that is WordPress, and I have to think about another industry or liken it to something else. And I think about my experience in automotive. Certain brands that did acquisitions believed in brand sovereignty, and they allowed the brand that was absorbed to operate as itself, but have exposure to tools at a higher level, like what Jason was talking about. And those, like Porsche with Volkswagen. Porsche is still very much Porsche. It's not Volkswagen. But when you look at things like Chrysler and Fiat, and you look at those years that happened to those poor trucks and minivans, you go, oh my goodness, that's when brand sovereignty doesn't work and when things get in the way. And so when I look at that experience and compare it to my experience in WordPress, I'm very much of the mindset of like acquire and absorb what you can, grow as best as you can, be a capitalist. I love capitalism. But if you can endorse companies that you buy and give them brand sovereignty, but with tools and budgets to grow, that's what's going to make the end user happy. And at the end of the day, our job is to add value to as many people as possible in everything that we do. So as long as these companies can add value to others, even if it comes at a higher expense for some, that's what we got to suck up.
Right. Heather had to leave because for understandable reasons. We're going to go for a break. We've got one or two stories. There's one particular story that I really want to cover. We're going for our final break. We'll be back in a few moments, folks.
Hey, it's Spence from launchflows.com. If you've been looking for a fast and easy way to create powerful sales funnels on WordPress, then look no further than LaunchFlows. In just minutes, you can easily create instant registration, upsells, downsells, order bumps, one-click checkouts, one-time offers, custom thank you pages, and best of all, no coding is required. For as little as $50 per year, you can own and control your entire sales funnel machine with LaunchFlows. Get your copy today.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Lifter LMS, the leading learning management system solution for WordPress. If you or your client are creating any kind of online course, training-based membership website, or any type of e-learning project, Lifter LMS is the most secure, stable, well-supported solution on the market. Go to lifterlms.com and save 20% at checkout with coupon code podcast20. That's podcast20. Enjoy the rest of your show.
We're coming back. I just want to point out that we've got some great special offers from our sponsors, plus a curated list of all the best plugins if you're a WordPress professional. To get all these goodies, all you have to do is go over to WP-Tonic/deals, WP-Tonic/deals, and you can get all these goodies. Plus, you can sign up for the WP-Tonic weekly newsletter, which I write. So what more could you ask for or not? So on to the next story. Another story. We've got some. It's been a busy month. I never thought this was going to happen. If I was a betting man, the DOJ sues Google over dominance in online advertising market. Who would ever guess? Jason, I never thought this was going to happen because I'm just going to put this. I always felt that Google's very, very useful to the American government. I always felt that Google was providing some of the AI technology that the government was utilising to monitor through Snowden's revelations that the government has built a sophisticated electronic system to survey Americans and definitely anybody outside America. And I always thought that Google was very, very useful to the American government. So I never thought this was going to happen. It's not been a great month for Google, is it, Jason? Really, is it?
It's a trying month for them for sure. I mean, AT&T was useful to the government too, and they broke them up. I think Google might even be more useful to the government if it was broken up because the smaller thing is easier to control than a bigger thing. I'm not sure that breaking them up, though, is actually the issue, although that's kind of the tools they have. I think one of the problems with the laws about big companies in America is they let's just assume for like 1 minute that they were appropriate 100 years ago when the antitrust stuff existed and we were breaking up like steel companies. So let's assume these laws were useful then. Even if so, they're not useful now because the nature of the companies are so different and the laws haven't updated. So, for example, one of the key things is, are consumers harmed in the sense of price? specifically price. Spencer probably knows more about this in the legal side. But with Google, it's like, are you kidding? It's free. So no, they're not. Next question. And if the law is written that way, that's hard to argue against. So again, like the problem here is the law, and like what tools do we have to say what is acceptable or not acceptable behavior for companies? So I think, interestingly, I think it's, for me personally, it's less of like antitrust, like break them up, and more of business practices. Like, are they unethical in their business practices? So, for example, suppose Google today was just what they were 20 years ago, which is we try to do the best search and we put ads around it, and we send you to other sites. If that's still what they did today, I would argue if they're dominant, that's because people choose the product, because you can choose DuckDuckGo and Bing and like a million other things. So they're not making anyone using it. It really is just a natural monopoly of a better product. And what's your problem? But that's not what Google has done. It's not true that that's all Google has done. What they did is they scraped and destroyed Yelp in a way that seems predatory and bad. What they do is they take clips out of websites, they stick them there so that Google gets the ad revenue for the content that is copyrighted by others. Google takes that copyrighted content by others, puts it on their own search results, put ads on it, and that company or that website who has the copyrighted content never gets the ad revenue, never gets the analytics, never gets a chance to say sign up for our newsletter or whatever it is they're trying to do that they made the content to do. And by the way, they were successful because it was the number one search result. Like, they did everything right. And Google's like, no, I'm denying you that because I'm just literally taking your copyrighted content and I'm monetizing it. And so because Google has changed what they were, then I don't defend that for the reason I just gave. And so I think, to me, it's not. Unfortunately, the DOJ probably just has the tools they have. I'm not really sure, but like they're probably somewhat hamstrung by whatever the laws are. But to me, like, the ethical issue isn't even about like, oh, Google has, I don't know, AWS and Waze. Like, that's probably not a problem. That's a conglomerate, and I don't know that that's giving them special power. But the fact that, to me, what they do with search is unethical, that to me is the issue. What I have no idea about is like, is there a law that we can use for that? Like, I don't know.
Right, yeah. So what do you reckon, Spencer?
So the two laws that were from the turn of the century, 1914-ish, Clayton Act, Sherman Act, and they're really pretty simple. Like, the Clayton Act avoids powerful companies from doing unscrupulous things, predatory things. The Sherman Act is basically to prevent somebody, whether it started as a natural monopoly or not, from having a monopoly over especially the infrastructure. So while steel would be interesting, I think like the railroads were where it came from. If you own the tracks, everything flows through you. Well, this is one time where I would say, I don't think Jason was strong on this, but like I would say I actually feel like this is the problem with Google's situation. They have up till now, until the ChatGPT thing came along, own the tracks of all the advertising dollars, and they're taxing everybody both ways, regardless of the outcome. And it prevents not the little guy from competing, it prevents one of the other behemoths from competing. And that means ultimately the consumers lose because Google sets the tax, sets the price, they control the whole thing. And we've seen this in other things, like, for example, Microsoft with Windows 95 way back when. We've seen it with Apple with the App Store in varying degrees of success in some countries. But see, the problem is when you get everybody all hooked, like, I can't say the names of my 3 girlfriends here, but I have 3 electronic devices. If I say their name, they will start talking to me. If you have 1 billion of those around the world, you sort of control a certain amount of infrastructure and spyware over what people's behavior is. So what I see the situation being is that tools are limited, but we have the counter argument, which is we're all kind of hooked on being able to one-click Amazon order, and we're all hooked on the fact that you can run a business and pay for like AdSense or whatever you're doing. It's not easy to undo the convenience of hopping on a railroad train that goes to everywhere. And in the past, the government has tried to intervene with the air traffic controllers and the airlines, and they've screwed things up beyond belief and had the kind of go backwards. So interesting, yes. Easy to fix? No way. Is this the end of it? No, because here's the last part. What Jonathan mentioned is really relevant. The new thing that's coming along, even as of this week, is the content that was scraped up until 2021 for use by OpenAI has now basically started to become identified. Like, they're doing forensic analysis. Like, I'm Bobby Joe Bob. I wrote that in 1975. You owe me $47 million. Well, again, go out and look at the Getty Images lawyers. they're right now like they can't control themselves over this. So when that comes down, this entire model is going to be, as of this week, it's $42. What if next week it was $187 a month to use OpenAI? Is it still as attractive for ChatGPT? I don't know, but that's the conversation we're all going to be having.
So, by the way, I had that note on the previous topic, and an interesting thing there is, of course, you would like to say, hey, yeah, you shouldn't use other people's copyrighted stuff, and I agree. Like the website content's the same. Like everyone's focused on the Getty because the lawyers are doing that. But didn't it also like look at all these websites that have copyrighted content? So that's the same thing as Getty. Like it's copyrighted content.
You said it yourself so eloquently. It's that. Let's say you're a company that spent the last 15 years manually curating all of these references and it's copyright, and then they scrape it for free and don't send somebody on to you.
Yeah. Here's the dilemma. Here's the dilemma. Like, so that's really bad. So like the knee-jerk thing is we can't have that. And of course, that's very reasonable. And I like my knee-jerk reaction is, yeah, I agree. Can't do that. But then my thought is, okay, so Getty says, can't do that. You have to pay us to license the content. We'd be happy to license it to you for $1 billion a year.
Right.
And so here's what happens. OpenAI says, okay. Google says, okay. And a couple other companies could, Microsoft via OpenAPI, so whichever. Amazon could say yes. Apple could say yes. And no one else can say yes. Right. And so what that does is, okay, fine, you solved that thing about stealing the content. And what you've done is ensured that only the massive companies that have the most power will have good AI. Is that a good outcome?
Well, what we're going to see some version of Napster 3.0 when you look at Spotify today. So in the music industry, we went from, no, you can't do that, to, well, the Grateful Dead gives it away for free, to, oh, Sean Parker is giving it away for Napster, to licensing you fractional pennies, but only if your lawyers are good at keeping track. So the problem is not easily solved, but your point is well taken, because the problem is, we've had a system to date where you had to get to the end page to get the data, but now it gathers it up. And what if it blends it? You didn't mention it, but I'm thinking like, okay, fine. We don't need your Getty image. We're going to take it and we're going to change it a little bit. And now it's ours because the laws aren't written to adjust for that. We're in a brave new world across the board, but that's the snow globe to me that makes it exciting to be in this.
Right. So, Chris, in some ways, I think this is much about nothing, because the reason why I say that, Chris, is the Gilded Age, and something that J.P. Morgan has been written that he said. He was with his son, and Teddy Roosevelt was saying, we're going to break up your trusts. And his son was saying, are you not upset, Dad? And he turned it, son, it's all been arranged, son. I'm going to make even more money. The share prices of the breakup is going to be worth. So in some ways, I don't think this is going to affect Google at all, because based on history, they're going to, if they do have to break up into separate divisions, they're going to make even more money, aren't they, Chris?
I mean, potentially. I don't know the details of that in terms of, how the money would flow. But, just when you think a company can't be disrupted, like we're talking about with the AI thing, like I think of something like YouTube. Who's going to fight the next YouTube? It can't be disrupted. I would have said the same thing about Google search. And now Microsoft has a chance with their AI lightning in a bottle situation, potentially. But yeah, the legal framework stuff, I think, is the biggest problem, because it's just too far behind, just like we've seen with crypto recently, and like what is a security and all this stuff. Like our legal system and our regulatory framework cannot keep up. It is really slow. It's really far behind. Business and technology is moving really fast. So yeah, I don't really have a answer here. And Google instant results was like the buzz, like, oh, they don't have to click through to my website anymore because it's giving the information in the search. So that's the same thing with, okay, well, AI is just giving the information, the content.
Yeah, maybe
the traffic.
Maybe I'm a dinosaur. I like links. If the links are going to content that matches up with my search and has good stuff on it.
But what do we do? What do we do?
A bit of a dive. I call it a Google wander, like the Aussie. you're out in the outback. I call it a digital wonder. You're doing a bit of a 2 hours later, but sometimes I like that.
I mean, I miss Polaroid cameras too, but what is the point of technology is to create efficiency and speed, right? And do people want links? No, they want information. They want it free. They want it fast. They want it correct. That's what they want. So, the delivery vehicle is changing. People are figuring out how to monetize. Let's not screw the creators over. If a creator wants to block the search engine, they use the robots.txt. We're going to figure something else out for AI to tell it what to do. Right now, OpenAI, because it's not monetized, it's not getting as much heat. But as soon as they start making money off the results without sending traffic to the creator, I think what we really need to do is, look at the bottom up, not just the top down, break up the conglomerates or the monopolies, but also just look at the creators where this information is coming from, and how do we, not crush the independent content creators and publishers out there.
All right, let's go.
There's never going to be a breakup here. The worst for Google is a slap on the wrist, like how much money, because there's nothing to break up. And like at the end of the day, like the problem of what
I would agree with that. I think they got a stranglehold on our online advertising.
The existential threat to Google is the consumer desire for a better result. I mean, like this whole thing with Netflix and so forth. Everybody, including myself, loves for $15 anything on Netflix, Hulu, Disney. That by itself is what crushed red boxes or DVD rentals or buying a videotape. I mean, that's just public demand.
Right. If you're okay with this, Kirk, I'd like to go on to the end story because, all right, thanks, Kurt. So Twitter new developer terms ban third-party clients. Well, Jason, I think, and Spencer's got some prior history of this. This really, why when you got a startup or an app or some services, you got to be really very understand the Freudian deal you're doing with the devil when you're utilizing a priority platform to build your business on. And that's the beauty of open source and WordPress, because some dickhead can't do this to you. What's your thoughts about this, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly could say if TweetDeck builds an API, it only works with Twitter, and Twitter changes its mind, too bad for TweetDeck, and that is true. Okay. Any company that depends on a vendor for its existence is then at the mercy of that vendor, but also probably gets catapulted forward also because of that vendor, just like we were with WordPress, right? So fair enough. It's like you say, it is a bargain, or it is a two-edged deal. Okay, fine. So to me, the question is, I mean, surely it's allowed. They're allowed to turn off their API. Fine. It's not a DOJ question this time. Okay. To me, the question is strategically, is this a good idea? And, of course, this is just now opinion, but I think that's an interesting question. I think, general public outcry is people don't like that. And I understand why they did it anyway. It's probably to control the experience. That's what happened the last time that Twitter had an API that invited a lot of people to build clients for the platform and then killed the API and murdered all those companies. And so to me, it's like Twitter's done that before, and Elon's unpredictable. So that's unfortunate. But strategically, is that a good idea? I don't think it's a good idea for Twitter to kill it. In fact, I think it's a good idea for Twitter to have a very open API strategically. Again, just an opinion. And the reason is that to me, a good strategy leans into not only your strengths, but the ones that are differentiated from competition, things that your competition won't do. That doesn't automatically mean it's good, but at least it's like a good place to start, because you want to lean into that, because they won't be able to copy whatever that is. So for Twitter, that means things like bite-sized content, not big stuff, the fact that the feed's addictive, the personal networks, obviously, that people build on top of it, the simplicity of the objects that get put into tweets. They're like, there's not even like there's hashtags and ats, but even that's just text. Like, it's a super simple format. And that means there's so much things you can do, since they're in little packets and simple, like clients of every kind on devices of every kind in languages of every kind are all possible. Those are all advantages of Twitter. And so to me, Twitter had an API and had a better one before. And the fact that people could mix and remix everything about it, the presentation of it, the clients to interact, the automation to do stuff, I mean, just whatever, tons of stuff. To me, that's a great advantage. Facebook shut that off very long ago. It's not possible with Facebook to build something, an ecosystem like that around Facebook, because they said no. Same with WhatsApp, same with Snap, same with even YouTube. It's super, super closed down in terms of how you can like interact with it. And I'm not saying those are bad ideas. I'm not saying those companies are wrong either. I'm just saying Twitter is in a position where, hey, all of my social media competitors do not have an API and can't really do it or won't or whatever. It's a good bet that they won't. But I can, both because I have one and because my format is such that it's real easy for people to do it. Another example that would be complexifying is like permissions, complex permissions of who can see what. Again, that would make it harder to make an API because how do you do all that? But Twitter's like, it's public. I mean, I know there's private feeds, but like more or less, it's just like, oh, we just don't have that. Like, oh, it's just so, it makes it so easy, you know? So it's like Twitter can have that ecosystem, that API ecosystem. Of course, I'm talking about a two-way API. It can do that and others can't. So it could build an ecosystem that no one else could have. To me, that is just so juicy. So if I were trying to build a strategy for Twitter, to me, this would be one of my pillars for that reason. We can do this and build a whole ecosystem and no one else can. And so, you know, is it a good or bad and how big can it be and how much will it help us? I don't know. But whatever it is, we're going to get 100% of whatever benefit that could possibly be. And
well, I've got to say, Jason, you need to get on the phone with him. But you rather listen to pricks like that, Jenna Carter's. And,
I'll drive over there. We're in the city.
So, Kirk, do you think that this is partially driven by somebody that's a company entity that's drowning to some extent? You know, had to cough up, was it 146 billion for something that never made any freaking money anyway? And I understand the interest, one of the interest payments is coming up, which is 1.5 billion. Is this a sign? Is this what is really driving this, Kurt?
I don't know. I would love to be inside Elon's head sometimes and see if I could muster through the cobwebs.
No, I wouldn't advise that at all, actually.
Because it might be a scary adventure. But I remember a post he put up that said...
I think you would need medical treatment after that.
Post-purchase, I remember him saying that his own analysis showed 16 million actual real live accounts, you know, and all that kind of stuff that he would post. And if this is their way of trying to eliminate, you know, bots and automations and trying to drive an organic user experience, then, you know, if he starts to get that type of result, then maybe this was a good decision. And then maybe to Jason's point, when he trims down the automation and the bots and the nonsense, maybe he expands it in other ways.
Yeah. So, Spencer, Uncle Spence, it's kind of deja vu for you. It kind of brings your early days of consequence. You've mentioned this a few times, doing this deal with the devil, really, haven't you?
Yeah, well, you know, we can't compare Twitter to WordPress. This does, first of all, highlight the benefits to any entrepreneur or company who's looking to build on a framework as WordPress, because it's complete ownership and control versus a gilded cage that gives you the perception of value but comes at a price, like many contracts in life. But the thing that's underlying this, in my opinion, is it's kind of like the Shakespeare comedy, like Henry VI. It was like the first thing we do before this revolution is kill all the lawyers. Well, what I see going on is what Kurt alluded to as well, which is like, we really got to clean this mess up. And there's all these companies that are basically making money and we're not. And we just haven't figured it out. So the first thing we're going to do is dump everybody out. And then we'll figure it out if we do it all. And then we'll let them in, maybe as Jason alluded to, which I do agree is very juicy, very sexy. We will monetize the access to the API, which is always befuddled me because he also referenced something that I looked into. There's lots of old legacy Facebook things and early MySpace, Facebook, YouTube, where, oh, look, you can use the Yahoo email to download all of your Facebook friends. And I'm like, I would love to do that today, but that ship sailed 1 million years ago. And yet you ask yourself, what are they doing with all that data? All I get to do is just pay you for crappy ads that are hit or miss. Wouldn't it be cool if you did, like, you know, the guy who built BuiltWith? the one dude and one server and one helper was making like $5 million a year, just essentially scraping and aggregating into competitive research data. I mean, that would be infinitely more profitable than letting somebody put a blue badge on for $50.
Well, you still haven't recovered our Spanish phone friends that raised 150. What's the figure?
$187 million. But that's not.
See, Jason, you built a whole WordPress. All you needed to do, Jason, was have a phone company in Spain and get
the difficulty with the Twitter thing, not the least of which is that I personally feel like I lost a little bit of a hero, because I really felt like before the Twitter fiasco that Elon did hold the promise of being somebody who's going to help humanity move to the next level.
You are kidding, aren't you?
Listen, the point being, he started 3 companies, like one dude, 10 children, 20 women in his life, and all that craziness. They're in space and they're competing against. And now I see he's distracted by this, and I start thinking Howard Hughes, like he's lost it. So I'm saying the problem of the problems of companies like this is that Jack Dorsey and the other Evan, and everybody who founded Twitter, they were clearly just entrepreneur monetizing some cool idea. But now it's at the point where this really could be a public news channel, and somehow somebody's got to get it under control. And the best way to do it would be to treat it as it is, which is the value is in the data about the people. But I'm afraid that that's never going to come to earth, because the history shows that people who close things down on the API, it never resurfaces in the normal way. Maybe it resurfaces for the highest bidder to the black market, but not necessarily in the consumer level, and so forth. And it's really disheartening too, because we all gave our data in the early days. Oh yeah, here's all my kids' pictures and stuff, when we didn't know any better, and now they're using it for whatever purpose.
ChatGPT. Now, I'm just to finish off, I'm going to end this because this is not warm. Jason's been very, very patient. But there's been so much to discuss. But no, I'm afraid, Spencer, this is much darker. Yeah, I see him, not quite, but I see very strong echoes of Henry Ford in Mr. Elon. The good's really good and fantastic, but the dark is really, really dark. And that's what you got with Henry Ford, the good. And he was a dyslexic as well. So I got a kind of fuzzy feeling for Henry Ford, but the dark was really, really, really dark. And the brilliance was really, really brilliant. So I think that's what you're seeing with Mr. Elon. I think we're going to end it now. Panel, I think it's been a fantastic discussion. We've had some minor technical troubles. I think we were saying some things which Google just didn't like, so it kind of cut us off. We'll be back next month, the last Thursday of the month, the panel with a guest. Hopefully Jason will accept coming back later on. We haven't put him off for life. I don't think so. I think it's been a fabulous discussion. And like I say, we'll see you next month, the last Thursday of the month. See you soon, folks. Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening. We really do appreciate it. Why not visit the Mastermind Facebook group? And also, to keep up with the latest news, click wp-tonic.com/newsletter. We'll see you next time.